A United States education A United States education is your gateway
to a great American campus experience,
to pursue your passions,
to navigate cultural differences,
to gain real-world experiences,
to learn skills for a changing job market,
to thrive in your career,
to give back to your community and to the world,
to be the kind of person that you wouldn't have dreamed to be otherwise.
Come study in the United States. A United States education is your gateway.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our session, Leveraging Institutional Partnerships for Hemispheric Collaboration and Competitiveness in a New Era. My name is Anthony Colaha. I'm the Director of the Office of Global Educational Programs at the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs, and it is a pleasure to be with you today at the conference. Next slide. Oh, sorry, stay on this slide. And with me today, I have an excellent panel of distinguished professionals. I will be joined by my colleague at the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs, Director of Regional Education Initiatives, a good friend, Maggie Hug. I'm also joined by Bernie Barola, Vice President of International Programs at the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities, or APLU. Welcome, Bernie, great to have you. And also joined by Adria Baker, Associate Vice Provost for International Education at Rice University. Adria, thank you so much for joining us today. And before I turn it over to our colleagues and a good conversation today, I just want to make a few points and highlight some of the things that we're doing at the State Department's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs to support international education and partnerships in the region and around the world. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. It is a real honor to be able to introduce you to the U.S. Joint Statement of Principles in support of international education. This is an initiative together between the U.S. Department of State and the U.S. Department of Education. It was rolled out earlier this year, actually at a State Department function, the Education USA Forum. And it was highlighted with video messages by two sitting cabinet secretaries, Secretary Blinken of the State Department and Secretary Cardona of the U.S. Department of Education. Also supported by our colleagues at the Department of Commerce and the Department of Homeland Security. And the Joint Statement of Principles in support of international education is really a recommitment and re-emphasis of the value of international education for and across the U.S. government. I think if you go to the statement and take a look at it, and you can find that at our educationusa.state.gov website, you will see a number of key principles outlined in there. The focus on international student mobility to the United States and the value that we place in international students in and across the United States at so many of our great institutions. The value of more American or US students traveling around the world, including to the Western Hemisphere, to gain the competencies they need for a global society, to share American values and to learn from their peers around the world. You will see an emphasis on all educational levels, from primary and secondary education to the highest levels of higher education. And you will see a focus on international collaboration in science and innovation, among other things. So this is a very important statement, and I think you'll see a lot of forthcoming programming and initiatives to follow. And if you take a look at the slide, you'll see one of the quotations from US Secretary of State Blinken stating, "Continuing to nurture a vibrant community of international students is a foreign policy imperative for the United States." So next slide, please. And I mentioned I'm from the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs at the U.S. Department of State. You see sort of our mission statement on this slide. We are really committed where the State Department does diplomacy, government to government diplomacy. We in the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs support that diplomacy through people to people diplomacy. And we actually support through our exchange programs over 50,000 participants, US and international, every year on sports programs, cultural programs, professional programs, and educational and academic programs. And these really make a difference. They build relationships one individual at a time, really bringing our nations closer together and laying the groundwork for our engagement in the future, whether that's in business and trade, science, innovation, culture and arts, or actual diplomacy between governments. And you can see that through our direct exchange programs. Many of you have heard about the Fulbright program that supports mobility to and from the United States. Students, scholars, professionals, teachers. The Gilman Scholarship supports more young American undergraduate students engaging and seeing the world through study abroad. And our broader efforts to support mobility in both directions to and from the United States, including through our Education USA Global Advising Network. Next slide, please. And just a few words about Education USA, because it's extremely important to the work that we do to welcome international students to the United States, provide the information necessary so students around the world can navigate finding a good fit in the United States of where they want to study across the 4,000 or so accredited US colleges and universities in states all across the country. And we do that through about 175 or more, or advising centers in 175 or more countries and territories around the world. And as you can see on this slide, we actually have a robust network of advising centers in and across the Western Hemisphere. We partner with many entities. So we host at US embassies, at Fulbright commissions, at binational centers, as well as at local universities, libraries, and other institutions. And we really are working closely with US higher education institutions. So whether those are comprehensive research universities, those are public or private universities, those are community colleges or liberal arts colleges or universities, to bring information about those universities to students around the world and bring those students around the world, hopefully, to study in the United States. And the Western Hemisphere, as I mentioned, has a very robust engagement with the United States and includes 5 of the world's top 25 sending countries of international students to study here in the United States. Next slide, please. And among the programs and initiatives that Education USA supports, we have advising for students individually or in group advising around the world and in Western Hemisphere. We have events, we have fairs and forums bringing US higher education institutions to students so they can learn more about studies before choosing an institution to study in the United States. We of course do that in person and very much so over the last couple of years virtually. And so we will continue to engage virtually as well as in person. We have a robust social media presence with over 6 million followers. And we have some new initiatives. In addition to the joint statement of principles in support of international education that we rolled out recently, we also rolled out a new marketing campaign to promote study in the United States and highlight some of the reasons to do so. We have a series of videos that we've started rolling out and will continue to build on. We have a hashtag where you can join us in amplifying those videos in your own messages, study with us. And we look forward to continuing to engage with you through our various virtual and in-person events, advising, and other engagement opportunities. So with that, I am looking forward to a wonderful conversation with my esteemed colleagues. And before I turn it over to Maggie Hug, I just want to remind all of our viewers that if you have a question or a comment, please go ahead and put that in our chat, and we will do our best to respond to you. So with that, thank you very much. And Maggie, over to you.
Thanks so much, Anthony. Muy buenos dias. Bon dia to everybody who's joining us. It is wonderful. Next slide, please. I'm going to go quickly. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. Really quickly, I want to recognize some colleagues that you cannot see, but I can see them in the chat box. I want to recognize my colleagues from Washington, obviously Anthony, who is spearheading our panel today, and Jen Brown on his team. A lot of you know Jen and her wonderful work in the Western Hemisphere. Rita and Aret from the Education USA Brazil teams, and Maria Mercedes from Mexico. And it is wonderful to see so many names from the 100K family. I can see friends from Bogota and Costa Rica. So really quickly, in the 7 minutes that I have, I would like to just remind everybody about, or either remind you or invite you to learn more about the 100,000 Strong in the Americas Initiative and Innovation Fund. The Innovation Fund, if you don't know, is the driver that supports the larger hemispheric-wide initiative. And the purpose of this initiative and the Innovation Fund is to provide opportunity, partnership building opportunity grants to higher education institutions throughout the United States with their partners throughout Latin America and the Caribbean to build institutional partnerships, to build teams that will work together to create and implement innovative short-term models of program opportunities for students and faculty that will provide real-world opportunities for solving real-world problems in a host of academic fields and thematic areas, so that students have the opportunity to work together in teams at their home institutions and their host institution, both virtually and in person. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. We are very proud of the work which is a massive amount of teamwork that involves our team at the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs in DC at the US Department of State, our embassies, our public affairs teams throughout the region, our colleagues at Education USA. We cannot do our work without our colleagues in support of the Education USA teams throughout Latin America. Partners of the Americas, the lead NGO implementing partner, and over 30 companies, regional governments, and foundations that have helped to create the 100K, as we say in shorthand, the 100K Innovation Fund, which catalyzes student development and mobility across the Americas, builds internal capacity within HEI teams, and expands intra-regional partnerships. Next slide, please. We can't do this work without everyone listening, and also without many, many supporters. So over the last 7 years, so we use 2013 as the baseline, you can see that we have an incredible array of private sector, foundation, and regional governments that support us. The government of Colombia, for instance, just to give you an idea, has invested over $1 million within the last 6 years through their education entities such as MinCiencias, also SENA, and then also Esta. The government of Brazil through SENA, and I'll talk about that in a minute. We've just launched a new Brazil competition. SENA has joined us twice, and of course you can see our private sector, our colleagues, what we like to say Innovation Fund donor partners. Next slide, please. So this just gives you a very quick visual snapshot of where we are in the last 7.5 years. 25 countries, 49 US states, over 260 grants granted out to teams of 515 HEIs, and these programs are benefiting 10,000 and more students and counting. And what we want you to see here is the incredible teamwork it is across sectors between the US government, again, the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs, the higher education community throughout the Americas, and then our private sector, public sector donors. Next slide, please. 10 top countries. We have 10 top countries and the 10 top US states. This just gives you an idea that with the Innovation Fund grant competitions, these are the top 10 countries throughout the Americas that are engaging in 100K partnerships, that are working with US universities, community colleges, HBCUs, HSIs throughout the United States. And we're excited. We've had 32 competitions to date since 2013, And we have more in pipeline, and I'm going to make sure that all of you are aware of what we have now and coming up. Next slide, please. Tap 10. These numbers, you can see the states that are involved. This also closely tracks to some of the open doors trends. These are some of the big US states that where we have a plethora of wonderful higher education teams that are partnering with Latin America using the 100K Innovation Fund grants. Remember, the Innovation Fund is the driver that helps institutions build partnerships, either create brand new partnerships or build on existing partnerships with Latin American and Caribbean institutions. Next slide, please. Again, we're just so proud of a recent impact report, the Inter-American Dialogue, a prominent think tank in Washington, that the 100K programs, not only do they prove that they're the student cohorts are 52% more diverse than traditional exchange programs. We're very excited about that. And that 100K partnerships and training and exchange programs have a catalytic impact on both the academic and professional development of students. Next slide, please. If you're not aware, we have just launched a brand new Innovation Fund Convocatoria competition. This is designed to build new 100K partnerships and training and exchange programs between the US and Brazil. I want to recognize again my colleague Rita from Education USA in Brazil and her team. They're part of this team effort to ensure that more institutions in Brazil and the Sinai Institution and Innovation Institutes are partnering with both Brazilian universities and US universities. And you can see the robust fields that we have for these kinds of training programs. Next slide, please. Finishing up and coming up, US Chile and US Andean competitions are coming up. Next slide, please. And then finally, if you're not sure what to do, you can't remember anything I've said, please take a look at these 3 websites. We want you to join the Innovation Network, the 100K Network. It's free. It's your one-stop shopping platform to create, to collaborate, to connect with institutions throughout the Americas. It's free. You can sign up as an individual. You can sign up as an institution. This is also how you will find out more information and keep up. We have webinars. We are frequently at conferences, virtual and in person. And this is where you also learn more about the RFPs. It's where you can download the RFPs. If you follow the RFPs and for the grants, where it says apply for the grants, you can't go wrong. Again, think about your current or new partnerships that you want to build between the United States and Latin America. This is your tool in the toolbox to combine your efforts at the faculty level and the administrative level to expand your footprint in the Americas and to benefit directly the students and faculty in the US and in Latin America. Thank you so much. We can't thank all of you enough for listening. We can see that there are almost 70 folks joining us today. Thank you for the work you do. We are still, in all of us, dealing with the challenges of the pandemic. So again, these virtual conference forums, thanks to the CHI organizers, we want you to use all of the tools that we're talking about today to expand and enhance the amazing work that each of you do in regional and international education programming. Thank you so much. Over to my wonderful colleague, Bernie, so you can learn more about the important work of APLU. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Maggie. I'm always feeling energized after you speak. I'm here really to give a bit more of a background. I'm assuming that by being at this session today during the conference that everyone here has some interest in engaging with the United States in terms of higher education in a variety of ways. So I want to begin by really giving some background on the higher education system in the US because it's complicated. We all know that. The US is a massive country, not only in terms of landmass and population and economy, but also in terms of higher education. So if we can go to the next slide, actually the next slide again. Here we are. This is not the French flag, although it looks like it. I want to just give an idea a bit about understanding just how large and broad and how deep the US higher education system is. And this will hopefully give you some context. So we have nearly 4,000 degree granting colleges and universities in the United States, offering everything from a 2-year associate's degree to a 4-year bachelor's degree, master's and doctoral degrees. And just since I know we have many Spanish and Portuguese speakers, in American English and US English, the term college is not equivalent to colegio or colegio. It really is the first undergraduate experience usually of your study. So think of this as post-secondary education when I refer to colleges. Now in the US, you can see there's quite a number of different types of institutions, over 1,300 community colleges. This is where you oftentimes may start your education, doing a 2-year degree, associate's degree. It's oftentimes the first half of your bachelor's degree. And then we have the smallest number, which are the public universities, which I work with, just over 770. And then the largest group are the private universities. And we're going to be hearing from Rice later, which falls in this category of private colleges and universities in the United States. So quite a few. Now, collectively, there are about 20 million students enrolled at these just under 4,000 institutions. That's a very large number. I mean, just in context, that's larger than the population of Chile or Ecuador, for example. So that's how many students are in the US system. And collectively, every year we award about 4 million degrees. So, you can think of this as roughly the population slightly bigger of Uruguay in terms of the number of degrees that our universities award every year to our students. So it's a very large system. But unlike a lot of other countries, we do not have a Ministry of Higher Education that oversees all of these different universities and colleges. Our system is very decentralized at the state and local level for the public universities and completely independent for private institutions. They don't really report necessarily directly to governments in terms of Ministry of Higher Education. So with such a big system and no Ministry of Higher Education, for a lot of people, the question becomes, how do you even interact with the US higher education system? And if you're a student, I would say sort of the first point of entry, and probably one of the most important, is Education USA. Education USA can really help you start navigating, understanding the US system, the types of schools, and really helping you identify the right fit, whether that's a public or a private institution, whether that's in a warm part of the country, a cold part of the country, urban, rural. There's many different ways. There's really an institution for every type of student out there. And Education USA can help you with that. But if you're a university rector, a president, a faculty researcher, maybe a government official that's trying to connect with the US higher education system more broadly, where might you start? Education USA is an option, but there is another group, and those are the higher education associations. And I'm going to go into that. So we can go to the next slide. So higher education associations are really unique in the United States. You can think of these as how universities sort of organize themselves. Because again, this is a massive system without a Ministry of Higher Ed. So universities tend to self-organize themselves into groups with somewhat peer institutions. Getting some. Thank you. So you can think of the higher education systems or associations as ways that universities organize themselves. And they serve really 4 functions. Associations help those institutions represent themselves as a collective group. And they're oftentimes organized by type of degree that they offer or type of institution, public or private. They advocate for their members. In the United States, that means specifically oftentimes to the US government. So again, we don't have that Ministry of Higher Ed. So the associations will oftentimes represent their member universities to government for funding, for policy changes. This might look, for example, I work for public universities. We would be very interested if the US government put more money in public research. So we would be advocating to Congress for more funding for public research, for example, because that would benefit our member institutions. We also represent our member universities abroad, exactly as I'm doing today. It's very normal for us to meet with other governments, with conferences to represent a large section of the US higher education system, as opposed to just individual universities. And then finally, we look inward. We can convene our member universities together to look at challenges and issues that we all face in higher education. So maybe it's how do we do a better job of making college education affordable, or how do we increase graduation rates for our students? And by having a group of universities to kind of work and address these challenges, we oftentimes can come up with solutions that are a little bit better than if a university was trying to solve this on their own. So that's really, again, if you think about associations, it's how we organize ourselves in the United States amongst the very large number of universities and colleges. So next slide, please. And I'll go through this very briefly, but there are 6 major associations in the United States. Pretty much every accredited degree granting college or university is a member of one of these 6 associations. The first one on top is the American Association of Community Colleges. They represent all of our 2-year community colleges in the United States. The second group is the American Association of State Colleges and Universities. This represent our comprehensive public universities that are offering bachelor's as well as master's degree programs. Some doctoral, but primarily bachelor and master's degrees. The National Association of Independent Colleges and Universities. They represent all of our private colleges and universities in the United States. I will speak more about the Association of Public and Land Grant Universities, which I represent, but we really represent the large research, public, and land grant universities. The Association of American Universities represents both public and private heavy research universities. There's only about 65 or so. And then the American Council on Education is sort of a blanket umbrella higher ed group representing the higher ed community to our federal government in many respects. So these 6 associations are great ways if you want to interact with US universities on a broader, larger level. You could reach out to a particular association who would then be able to connect with members within that association. So if you're particularly interested in community colleges, you'd want to work with the American Association of Community Colleges. If you're very focused on looking at research, you might be looking at the American Association of Universities or my organization. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So just about my association, APLU, we are the oldest higher education association in North America, founded in 1887. But we're relatively small. We only have 240 or so member institutions across the United States, Canada, and Mexico. We are North American in scope, although for today's purposes, I'm really just going to focus on the United States. We have about 225 US members. So again, if you think about there being 4,000 universities and colleges in the United States, we're a very small number of those institutions. However, we numerically represent a very large number of the higher education community in terms of students. So about 30% of all students in the United States are at one of our member institutions. That's over 6 million students that we have on our campuses. And we award about 1/3 of all the degrees in the United States. So over 1 million degrees are awarded annually by our member institutions. But the biggest thing is our research. We are such heavy hitters when it comes to research. About 60% of all university-based research in the United States comes out of one of our member universities. We spend close to about $50 billion a year on university-based research. Just to give you some perspective, that is more than any other country in the Western Hemisphere, other than the United States, just amongst our member universities. It's even larger than what Canada or Brazil or even places like Russia will spend on research as an entire nation. And we're talking only about our public research universities. And you can see here some of our members that you probably are very familiar with, schools like MIT, Cornell, Berkeley, University of Virginia, Michigan, and University of Texas at Austin. Next slide. So now that you have a better understanding of sort of the different associations and the US higher ed system, how can you engage with us? So for our member institutions, our public research universities, we have several areas that we are interested in engaging with governments, with universities, and with students in Latin America, in the Western Hemisphere. So one is around research collaboration. We're always very interested in research collaboration. How can we work on research, especially around the UN Sustainable Development Goals? That is kind of the focus that much of our international research is on. We're always interested in student and scholar exchanges, both virtual and in person. The great thing about the Western Hemisphere is the time zone is almost the same anywhere we work. So we can have synchronous classes that are virtual between a US university and a university in Brazil or Chile or Colombia or Mexico. It's much easier than doing that in Asia or in Europe. We obviously have a wide range of study, bachelor's, master's, doctoral degrees for students interested in coming to one of our universities. But we also are engaged in capacity building and international development. So there are many opportunities that we'll work with universities in Latin America on World Bank projects or USAID funded projects with higher education systems. And we work closely with governments directly. So oftentimes we will work with a Ministry of Agriculture at a particular country, or transportation or science, to help them build some of the capacity at their own institutions, but look at specific research projects that we might have some experience in. So if, for example, Ministry of Agriculture, it might be, how do we do a better job of connecting our agricultural research with farmers and local communities? And we have quite a bit of experience in that area. So this is one where we could be useful in partnerships, for example, with the Ministry of Agriculture in a particular country. And then, of course, connecting through Education USA. I can't say enough about Education USA. They're always the great partner of ours in how we can reach out to different countries and students, and also from your side, how you can reach out to our association as well as our member universities. So we are very interested in Latin America and partnering, again, both with students, with universities, and with governments. And with that, let me thank you all. And I'm very pleased to introduce my colleague from Rice University, which is one of our major top private research universities in the US, Adria Baker. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Bernie. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Please go to the next slide. As Bernie mentioned, I'm Adria Baker. I'm from Rice University. Next slide. Just a little bit about our university. We are in Houston, Texas, the fourth largest city in the United States. And just to bring it down, the first presenter, and Anthony was talking about the Department of State and what the U.S. government has set for us. And then to bring it down specifically on 100K strong and how those can work. And then you have this wonderful associations and publics. So let's go down to more of case study and what our university can do. And that'll help you think, hopefully, on what it is that you can do as you work with U.S. universities. So we're a little bit over 100 years old. And we're a private comprehensive university with bachelor's, master's, doctoral degree, artist diploma. And then we have we're at close to 8,000 students, almost half and half graduate and undergraduate. It's highly selective, and we are a research institution. So as Bernie was talking about, we're part of the AAU, the one that he mentioned. We also have a very residential college system, which is very hands-on, the personal touch, and you'll hear about the personal touch the whole time when I talk, because that is important to our university. We have multiple institutes for many disciplines. We have cross-disciplinary work, multiple disciplinary, a lot of fields that are general, you might cross. And then we're part of the Medical Center, which is the largest medical center in the world. Again, in Houston, Texas, with very international city, where 1 in every 4 people were born outside the United States, with over 100 consulates. So it's a great place to be, and many people from Latin America are going to be coming through Houston to go to other places. So just let us know. We'd love to host you on campus and make you feel welcome. We're in the middle of the museum district. And then we've had Nobel Prize winners and Pulitzer. Next slide, please. And then just to tell you a little bit about our international, and then I'm going to go on to other specifics. 26% of our overall population, student population, is international. We very much welcome international students. And for years, Latin America has been our priority, and we're doing different things to try to increase the student population from Latin America, and especially because it's so close to so many countries, to be able to go back and forth. There were 114 countries represented in students and scholars this year, and we have active MOUs all over Latin America and around the world. And we have a very strong Canadian student population, as well as other countries. There's strong international research between faculty, using our students, our scholars, and we do send out students with different programs, from academic programs at many different levels. It could be, for credit, not credit, faculty-led exchanges. But throughout our priority mission statement, we have clearly that exchanges and work with Latin America and global is important. Next slide, please. So some of the, let's go down now specifically to a case. What does it look like for us? I mean, and I can't wait to tell you a few specifics that have happened just in the last 2 days. But broadly, university, we keep talking about Education USA, and I cannot underestimate what they are and how important they are. They are great partners with us. We depend on them very much, and I think that in the different countries around Latin America and Canada, it was a great opportunity to work with those individuals to just learn about how can I interface and what can our students do, and we depend on them very much, and there's many meetings and trainings that they have. And then the Fulbright program, and I'm just going to tell you personally, I mean, Fulbright is very, very important, and they're in many or most of the countries where you're located, and you can ask about it. Even if you don't know where to go, you can contact Education USA and they'll point you in the right direction. We have close relationships and engagement, particularly with Fulbright Brazil, Argentina, Mexico, and others. We're looking forward to getting even closer. And just on a personal note, I'm on a Fulbright right now in Paris. And this is a really important way in funding that can help other people to go back and forth in your country and for you as well. And then we have, you know, there's different ways to categories for students, for faculty, for researchers. There's so many different ways to do that. And then we also have through the State Department, U.S. Department of State, we have this thing called the J visa. Well, what does that mean? That means that it gives us a broad opportunity to have visiting faculty or visiting junior researchers or interns or people who are specializing in a particular part of a skill. Researchers, faculty, all kinds of levels coming to us. And we have a very active J program. Most universities do. You probably won't know about it, but it allows us to think outside the box and how we can add to the mobility of just bringing individuals to our campus. Next slide, please. So as we talk, I just want to say, just in the last 2 days, I just want to think about what has happened in the last couple of days. Well, that we've been able to just to give you kind of an example. So Fulbright sends out students. I've learned of the many opportunities both ways, from countries to the US to your country. And again, I'm a product of that, and I'm so grateful every day. Just yesterday, we were talking about these 3 scholars that are coming from the Dominican Republic through a fellowship through the State Department. Or thoughts on just different partnerships while I've been here, talking about how, okay, so we can't travel, maybe sometimes you can't, but you can through virtual exchanges and programs called Quill. And then just engaging with the general consulates and attaches that if you contact your government, they may have a consul or educational person in one of our cities or near us. They have somebody over that city of a university that you'd like to work with, and they can help you talk. And then also we've already done education 100K strong. And so I'm really grateful. I mean, we are one of the recipients of 100K strong, and I will guarantee you that we'll be we've put in other proposals, and we'll be putting in another one for the Brazil that's coming up. In our university, some things that we do is we have country interest specific groups, and it just kind of comes from the heart, the motivation, the enthusiasm, and that may be something that you might want to learn about on what we're doing, so that we can add your country as one of our interest groups and we can learn from you. And then the State Department, they just bring delegations, and so we're so grateful for that opportunity as well. And we've been able to grow our student populations just because we have an interest and we work with the State Department. Next slide. And so as I close up, I just want to say, what can we do in a post-COVID era? And I know, I mean, traveling here has been different, but right now, I recommend that just go ahead and build on first start out with building on existing programs and replicate what you're doing with other institutions. Sometimes without travel, it's hard to build. Seeking guidance from your Fulbright Commission, Education USA on specialists and partnerships. That's what we need to work on. And so again, you can go straight to them. They can help you possibly set up like even a call for, maybe you have a faculty or a researcher or whatever in your university, just talk to the Fulbright Commission to see how can I set up a call to get somebody from the US or to come for a while. And then inquire information about what is the partner institution find that is a successful international outcome. Lots of times I find myself in my little bubble and what I think and what we think is important and what and our priorities. But lots of times we have to think outside the box and just find out, what do you think is successful? And then what we think is successful and how we can make that happen. And so it has dialogue and trust. And then just adapt to the various kinds of models. I mean, we're looking at how you can, you may have faculty who are going to come do research for a short time. Work on empowering them so that they can represent your whole institution and maybe go see other people, not just your individuals. Also, looking at, different institutions are centralized, some are under one international group. Sometimes they are hybrid, and now is an opportunity to really think outside the box. And just working with individuals, you can do that. And then offer to serve as on a panel. I mean, I served on the 100K strong panel before. I've trained with Education USA. It's an awesome, you can just be a resource. So maybe you can just be a resource to one of the universities. And we would love that. So next slide, finally, where are the top, next slide. Top obstacles, of course, funding is always there, but that's what we're talking about, being creative with the Department of Education. Okay, flights and visas. Well, they're getting better. And yes, even coming to France, flights got changed a little bit. We had to be a little bit flexible. That's okay. I made it. I'm going back. Things are working. It seems like next week that things are opening up more for the US, and we welcome you. And then health and safety protocols. Yeah, you need to, each government, each country is going to have different things. We walk around here with different passes and just learn what those passes are. Ours change constantly. So whatever you learn today could change tomorrow. Next slide. But we'll make it. We're going to make it. So welcome you and for academic exchange to our universities, to all of the universities in the United States. Welcome to Houston, Texas. Welcome to Rice. Bienvenidos, bienvenido. And we just welcomed you to the United States because you are very, very welcome here. Thank you.
Well, thank you to all of our panelists. I think that was already a great set of introductory remarks and overviews. And, as Adria sort of prefaced when she started speaking, you've got the sort of bird's eye view, government wide level, all the way down to an individual institution. And I think you can see how with Rice University, Adria and her colleagues have utilized some of the things the other panelists were talking about in their strategy for how they internationalize their campus and engage with the world and engage with the Western Hemisphere. So really excellent job. I want to thank my fellow panelists. We have gotten a couple of questions, I know, and I want to thank our Education USA Regional Education Advising Coordinators for the Western Hemisphere, who have already started answering some of those questions, as they always do. But I want to take one question, and I think I'm going to turn it to Bernie first, and then Adria, maybe you have some additional comments, although I think you've touched on this. This is a question we get a lot, right? So if you are an institution, you are a government, you are someone anywhere in the Western Hemisphere, and you are looking to find a US college or university to partner with on a project for research, for teaching, for student exchange, how might you go about doing that? And Bernie, why don't you start us off? How do you do that through the associations?
Excellent question, and happy to do this. This is something that we do quite often, actually. So I would say if you're looking to interact with a U.S. university or universities on some kind of collaborative research, the kinds of questions I would ask first is, what kind of work is it that you're looking for? If this is very high research, we're talking agriculture, we're talking sort of doctoral level research, I would probably focus on the two associations that really are research focused: the American Association of American Universities, AAU, which includes private and public universities, and then APLU, which is the public and land grant universities. We then are able to reach out to our members. So let's use an actual example. Let's say a university in Argentina or a ministry in Argentina wants to further expand its wine production, and maybe they want to do some collaborative research with a US university on this. We might look at some of our universities in major wine producing parts of the United States that have extensive research in agriculture around wine production. So that might be schools in California and Washington and Oregon, but we would know how to interact and find those right institutions to match with your level of research that you're looking at. And I'm saying this from my own association, but if the type of collaboration you're looking at might be entry points into the US higher education system, then maybe you might be looking at collaborating with the Association of American Community Colleges, which is really a great pathway to get students into the US. So it really depends on what kind of research or what kind of collaboration you're looking at, but there's really one of these 6 associations can really help you think through and find the right members that fit what you're looking for. So that would be my long answer to that question.
Great. And Adria, anything else you want to add on that from the individual institutional perspective?
Sure. So students and individual international offices and scholars will contact us directly, and they will just research. Say, for example, you want to come to our institution, and so you go to rice.edu and you will do a search. You just put in the search, what am I interested in? I'm interested in bioengineering or nanoscience or whatever, something specifically. You can find out which institution, what university departments and what faculty members are working on that. And if they, one thing that we're receiving a lot are students and scholars coming to just do research individually with a faculty member. That has just grown so strongly. And then you can just, and then that way you can contact the faculty member directly, but you can always contact the international office. And it may be set up differently. Sometimes it's very centralized under one area, like at global education. Sometimes it might be just different, 3 or 4 or 5 different offices doing different things. But you can contact them and they will let them know what you're interested in doing. Even if it's a cold call, don't worry. We'll get you to the right place so that you can talk to somebody who can help you through that. And one thing that I just wanted to mention that I'm just so excited about now in this virtual learning is something that's called COIL, C-O-I-L. And basically it's, let's say that you can't travel right now. Let's say that you know, things are still kind of, funding's bad or hard or whatever. Through these contacts, you contact us, we could connect you maybe with a faculty member and maybe just do one-on-one kind of some units together, some classes together, and kind of partner. It can be synchronous, asynchronous, because we're now in that world, virtual world, so we can do some of that. And then afterwards, when things open up, when we find funding, when you get a Fulbright or something else, and you're able to travel. So it's kind of the precursor, but there's still connections and we're still growing internationally. And so that's another just kind of armchair strategy, but don't be afraid to call. We love, at all of our universities, we love getting contacts from universities, partner universities, and learning about you.
Great, excellent, and thank you both. Maggie, I want to turn back to you because, as always, there are a lot of questions about 100,000 strong in the Americas. They range from if you don't see your country up on the current list of eligible countries, can you expect that to happen, and what can you do about that? To what makes a strong proposal, and what are some current projects that you could give examples about?
Sure, real quickly, I just want to say amen to everything that both Bernie and Adria have said. It's all about networking. The folks who are with us today, joining us from all over the Latin America and the US, you're here for a reason, which is to learn about more tools in the toolbox. Again, I say the 100K Innovation Fund grants are a tool in the toolbox to build those partnerships at the institutional levels that directly lead to innovative models of virtual and in-person student and faculty exchanges. These are many faculty-led programs that have connections to Fulbright, that have connections to IVLP, that have connections to your campuses. Many people don't realize that there's a wealth of knowledge on your own campuses about how to partner or the leaders in certain fields. So in terms of 100K, really quickly, the website really is a huge resource, the 100K website. I'm here virtually, and so is the team of Partners of the Americas to answer questions. We have a robust back and forth all the time with higher education institutions. I would say that in terms, if you don't see your country now, right now we have the current US-Brazil convocatoria competition. We will have the US-Chile and the US-Andean competition is starting in the winter and spring. We are constantly working at the fundraising. Remember, this is a public-private sector effort across sectors. So we are constantly fundraising and fundraising, sometimes through conferences just like this. And our Education USA advisors, I know we have Gladys from Panama and we have Jenica from Canada and others. We are all, sometimes about folks that in the private sector or regional governments that might be interested in learning more about the 100K Innovation Fund and how this works. Connect those dots. I want to put out a huge plug to our public affairs teams at US embassies. Adria started to talk a little bit about that. The public affairs teams at every embassy throughout Latin America, their job is to work with all of us, Education USA, the Department of State, APLU, Rice University, and their jobs are to help connect the dots. And then quickly, in terms of competitive proposals, I can't say it enough. Reading that RFP, we work very hard to design very clear guidelines, lineamientos, in that RFP document. It's like a Bible. If you follow that, you can't go wrong. And you can see on the 100K website the amount of winning teams that we have had. Again, we've had 264 partnerships spanning 25 countries, 49 US states, over 500 higher education institutions involved. And these teams are doing amazing work, whether their grant has technically ended or whether they've applied for new grants. It is incredible, the sustainability. We're looking for innovation. We're looking for diversity inclusion in terms of participants. We're looking about how you can build a partnership at the institutional level that widens the arteries for training and exchange, both virtually and in person. And just like Adria said, things are opening up. 100K grants have always had a virtual component and they've always had the in-person, obviously with slowdown in 2020. But these are grants that would be starting going into next year. They're 1-year grants. I forgot to mention really quickly, anywhere from 25,000 to 40,000, depending on each competition. So estamos a la orden, sign up, take advantage of Education USA advisors. We cannot say it enough. Take advantage of the APLU network and take advantage of the expertise that Adria and her team have.
So we are getting down to about 5 minutes. I just want to make a quick comment and then I have one more question for our panelists. So to add to some of the responses that our panelists have shared, I want to encourage, I know there's often faculty research collaborations and teaching collaborations. When you're looking to build institutional relationships, please don't forget about your faculty members. They are great representatives of your universities writ large. Inform them about your goals before they travel, stay in touch with them and use them as your envoys so that they can help build those relationships as you're looking for broader partnerships. I want to emphasize what Maggie just said and others have said. The US embassies, public affairs sections, whether you're looking to open an Education USA center, propose important relationships, highlight your institutional research objectives, please look to the US Embassy's public affairs sections, and they can either answer your questions or point you in the right direction. So my last question to our panelists, we at the State Department and across the US government take diversity and inclusion extremely seriously. We want to make sure that all of our programming, including the international educational programming, the exchanges, are open to everyone. That means diverse individuals, diverse institutions across the United States and across the world, including in Western Hemisphere. Maggie, thank you for highlighting the value of that in 100,000 Strong in the Americas. What are you all doing to ensure that your international education and your partnerships are inclusive and that we are really engaging with everyone, with the countries and institutions we're working with? And we just have like 3 more minutes total.
Is that
Adria, go ahead.
Let's go with Adria, yeah.
Really quickly, we are working really closely with Fulbright and some of the IIE and LASPAL and amenities to try to make sure that we can nurture those students that are here on a Fulbright because they have diverse countries. And so we're using those, and then those individuals, we're using them to go into those countries and spread the word about studying in the United States. So we're using in-house, and then we're also just trying to use faculty to try to get people from countries that we normally would not get.
Great.
I would just add quickly, I think international students are part of the larger diversity, equity, and inclusion that we're seeing in our campuses. So, to me, having an international student in a classroom enriches the conversation, the perspective. It helps that American student that maybe hasn't traveled outside the United States experience a different culture. So for me, it's such an integral part of what we call DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, on all of our campuses. So I think it's an enriching experience for both the international student coming to the US and learning American culture, but also for those Americans getting to meet you and learn more about your culture and country.
And really quickly, I would just add that diversity and inclusion has been a huge part of the 100K effort for over 8 years. And so how does that happen? Working with all of you. It happens with working with a robust variety of institutions. The 100K grant competitions, sometimes there's a mystery. It is open. Just think of Bernie's slide, over 4,000 institutions throughout the United States, and huge, robust array of Latin American and Caribbean institutions, training institutions, public, private, et cetera. This makes sense at a regional development policy level, certainly in terms of the Bureau of Western Hemisphere Affairs and our leadership, but it makes good business sense. The workforce in Latin America, the workforce in the United States, it is diverse. All of us are in the business of providing training, tailored, important training, innovation training, and exchange opportunities, because the students from Latin America have to get to the US and vice versa. We have to have more US students going southbound, because that is the name of the game, is building that diverse, robust, more linguistically, interculturally connected workforce. Apply for 100K grants.
Great.
Well, one more thing, we have scholarships too for many different countries. So that's really important.
Great. Well, we are just about out of time. I want to thank my fellow panelists, really exceptional recommendations and insight into what you are doing and what we can all think about doing to improve our international education in the region. I want to thank Jennifer Brown, who works on my team and has helped coordinate this, our Education USA network in and across the region, our regional education advising coordinators, the US embassies that support our public affairs work in and across the region, and all of those who joined us. And I see many of you have engaged with our programs, have worked with Education USA, have been Fulbright scholars or researchers. So thank you for the work that you're doing. It's really collaboratively that we're going to achieve success between the US government, between the US higher education institutions and associations, our foreign partners, including governments, and then all of the people who take part in these programs and go on to be leaders in fields, in all kinds of fields, supporting the broader relationships that the United States builds with partner countries all around the world. So with that, I'm going to thank everyone for today and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.